In a troubling development, several countries have recently withdrawn from the Economic Community of West African States, Ecowas, amid growing tensions. The nations of Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso have all announced their departure from the regional bloc, citing disagreements over sanctions imposed by Ecowas. The leaders of these countries have strongly criticized the sanctions, arguing that they were not enacted in the best interests of Africa, but rather to appease Western powers. General Tchiani of Niger referred to the sanctions as inhuman, further escalating the conflict. Despite the withdrawals, Ecowas remains committed to engaging with the breakaway nations. The newly elected President of Senegal, Diomaye Faye, has reiterated his determination to see Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger return to the regional organization. In a speech delivered in Ghana, President Faye emphasized the challenges facing Ecowas and expressed his desire to strengthen regional integration through collective solidarity. He stressed the importance of unity in the sub-region, highlighting the need for collaboration to effectively address pressing issues, particularly in the area of security. Faye insisted on the critical need for constructive dialogue, especially with the nations that have withdrawn, expressing his belief that through open communication, solutions can be found to retain these countries within Ecowas and prevent further departures. The situation within the Economic Community of West African States remains fluid, with the future of the regional bloc hanging in the balance. As the tensions continue to unfold, the call for unity and collaborative efforts to address the region's pressing concerns has become increasingly urgent. In his recent speech, Senegalese President Diomaye Faye emphasized the reciprocal support that the breakaway nations of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger require, as well as the necessity for collaboration to address the obstacles they face. Faye expressed the belief that strengthening unity and stability within Ecowas should be the ultimate goal. However, the question remains: when will these leaders realize that the leaders of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger are not willing to return to Ecowas? And why do they desperately need these nations back now? The current state of Ecowas appears to have shifted from an organization representing the collective interests of its people to one resembling a club and coalition of heads of state, convening regularly to reciprocate favors and enforce compliance. It is doubtful whether the populace would have supported the imposition of sanctions on Mali and Niger if they had been consulted. In the case of Niger, numerous individuals expressed dissent against the actions proposed by Ecowas. Before delving further, it is important to share some shocking revelations made by Ibrahim Traoré, a key figure in the region. Traoré, who is closely involved with the situation, has shed light on the reasons behind the withdrawal of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger from Ecowas. According to Traoré, the leaders of these nations felt that Ecowas was no longer serving the best interests of their people and was instead catering to the demands of external powers. The imposition of sanctions was seen as a heavy-handed and unjustified measure that did not address the genuine concerns of the affected countries. Traoré's statements underscore the growing divide between the regional bloc and the nations that have chosen to distance themselves. Before we carry on, let me share some shocking revelations made by Ibrahim Traoré about why they left Ecowas. In a public address, Ibrahim Traoré, a key figure in the region, articulated the rationale behind the withdrawal of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger from the Economic Community of West African States, Ecowas. Traoré shed light on the historical context and envisioned future path for the nations. Tracing Ecowas' inception back to 1975, when it was established by military leaders to foster economic development within the region, Traoré expressed discontent with the subsequent influence of democratic leaders. He lamented that this deviation from the original intent of the community has led to growing concerns. Furthermore, Traoré passionately questioned the absence of Ecowas intervention during critical junctures, such as the widespread violence in Nigeria, Mali, and Burkina Faso. His deeply detailed address underscored pressing concerns about the organization's efficacy in addressing security threats and its role in safeguarding the well-being of the populace. President Traoré emphasized the critical nature of the situation, stating that it is imperative for those advocating democracy to comprehend the severity of the circumstances. He argued that the withdrawal from Ecowas was a necessary step to chart a new course that better serves the interests of the people in Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. Traoré's remarks shed light on the growing divide between the regional bloc and the nations that have chosen to distance themselves. As the crisis continues to unfold, the need for ECOWAS leaders to engage in meaningful dialogue and find a path forward that truly represents the aspirations of the West African people becomes increasingly apparent. In this hard-hitting address, President Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso condemned the impact of sanctions imposed on the region, framing the resulting loss of life as a crime rather than a mere tragedy. Traoré held those imposing the sanctions directly accountable for the thousands of Nigerian lives lost due to the unavailability of electricity and essential medications. The president underscored that the impact of these sanctions extends beyond Nigeria, also affecting Mali and indirectly impacting Burkina Faso. Traoré urged the public to acknowledge the individuals complicit in enforcing these harmful policies dictated by external entities. Expressing dismay at the withholding of electricity by certain foreign powers, Traoré emphasized that this action, for which payment is made, ultimately bolsters their economies. Furthermore, he noted that these entities sought to destabilize Mali, but their efforts failed. Despite the hardships endured, Traoré criticized the increase in electricity costs, borne by the people of these foreign nations. The president drew lessons from the ordeal, emphasizing the necessity of unwavering effort and vigilance in striving for independence and sovereignty. He condemned the closure of ports, a crucial access point for landlocked countries, as a violation of international laws, deploring the silence of the international community in response. Traoré underscored the reciprocal nature of their transactions and cautioned against blind obedience to external powers, stating that those enforcing unjust policies are now facing the consequences of their actions. In conclusion, President Traoré acknowledged the extensive suffering inflicted upon their people and announced their resolve to withdraw from detrimental dependencies, focusing on strengthening their regional organization, the Alliance of Sahel States, AES, in pursuit of shared aspirations and collective strength. In a move that has drawn sharp criticism from the Niger junta, the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, has announced a series of punitive measures against Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso. The junta has described these sanctions as unlawful, unauthorized, cruel, and irresponsible. The sanctions imposed by ECOWAS include 1. Shutting down of land and air borders between ECOWAS nations and Niger. 2. Implementation of a no-fly zone on all commercial flights to and from Niger. 3. Halting of all commercial and financial dealings between ECOWAS member states and Niger. 4. Freezing of all service transactions, including utilities. 5. Freezing of Niger's assets held in ECOWAS Central Bank. 6. Freezing of assets belonging to the state of Niger and state-owned enterprises in parastatals and commercial banks. 7. Suspension of Niger from all financial aid and transactions with financial institutions, particularly the EBID in the West African Development Bank, (LADB). 8. Imposition of travel restrictions and asset freezes on military officials involved in the coup attempt, as well as their family members and civilians who participate in any institution or government established by these military officials. 9. A call for the West African Economic and Monetary Union, UEMOA, and all other regional bodies to carry out these decisions. ECOWAS has made a surprising move by lifting the sanctions it had previously imposed on Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso. While the official explanation cites a desire to pacify the regional crisis, a closer look suggests that ECOWAS' decision may have been driven by the need to address the growing impact of the sanctions on its own economic interests. As the sanctions took effect, the repercussions became increasingly apparent. Niger's loss of airspace affected neighboring countries, with Benin's ports standing empty and Côte d'Ivoire's agricultural exports to the European Union left to spoil due to the absence of buyers. These tangible economic consequences appear to have compelled Ecowas to reconsider its approach. Interestingly, the African Development Bank's projections reveal that Niger is expected to have the highest economic growth in the region in 2024, despite the recent political upheaval and its exit from Ecowas due to the sanctions. This optimistic outlook for Niger's economic performance has likely added to the pressure on Ecowas to find a more balanced solution. Furthermore, reports indicate that Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso are actively working on plans to establish their own regional confederation, a significant step towards increased cooperation and integration in the area. This initiative, which has been under discussion since December 2023, suggests a shift in the regional dynamics and a potential realignment of economic and political alliances. In the face of these complex realities, Ecowas appears to have recognized that a continued enforcement of sanctions could have further detrimental effects on its own member states' economies. With no viable alternative to the disruptions caused by the sanctions, the regional bloc found itself compelled to lift the measures, prioritizing the preservation of its own economic interests. This shift in Ecowas' strategy underscores the delicate balance between diplomatic considerations and economic realities in the region. While the initial sanctions were intended to pressure the affected countries, the unintended consequences on Ecowas member states have ultimately driven the decision to reverse course. However, the lifting of the sanctions does not necessarily signal a resolution to the underlying political and security challenges that have plagued the region. As the region navigates this dynamic landscape, the focus will now be on finding a more balanced approach that addresses the concerns of all parties involved, while also ensuring the economic stability and prosperity of the West African community as a whole. The shifting dynamics in West Africa and Ecowas' decision to lift the sanctions on Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso is a complex and evolving situation. We've explored the various factors at play, from the economic consequences on Ecowas member states to the changing regional alliances and security challenges. Now, we'd like to hear your thoughts on this matter. What do you make of Ecowas' decision, and how do you think it will impact the region going forward? We're curious to get your perspective.